Hey, welcome to another episode of the Healthy Parenting Connector. I'm Katie Kimball with Kids Cook Real Food, and we're here to connect you parents who so desire to raise healthy kids, body, mind, and spirit with the experts who have the information you need. Today, I'm very honored to host Dr. Charlotte Markey. She's the author of a brand new book and a professor of psychology. We're going to talk all about body image, especially with girls, and nutrition, and just building those really foundational habits well for our little ones, teens and tweens. Thanks so much for being here.
It's such a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we'll jump in just a second, but I just want to introduce the audience a little more officially to you. So, Dr. Charlotte Markey is a professor of psychology and founding director of the Health Sciences Center at Rutgers University in Camden, where she teaches hundreds of students every day. Her PhD is in health and developmental psychology with an awesome and important focus on eating behaviors and body image. Dr. Markey's published nearly 100 book chapters and journal articles in peer-reviewed journals, which I love. So we're evidence-based today. And she's super famous, featured in publications like the New York Times, the US News and World Report, the Today Show, Washington Post, and lots more. But I think what's important for us today is that she's really passionate about educating parents and children about eating, body image, and health, and how those don't have to be mutually exclusive. They should all just combine together. So she's going to bring all her expertise working with schools, developing programs, teaching her college students, and being a wife, a mother of two, and an owner of a disobedient Bichon Frise. I forgot to ask how to pronounce the breed of dog. How do you say that, Dr. Charlotte?
It's Bichon Freeze, but little Toby did not survive the pandemic. So,
Oh
yeah.
no, we got to take that out of your bio. That's very sad. No more disobedient dog.
I know he was a rescue and he was so disobedient. And then in the summer, we got a pandemic puppy, and it's been a whole new experience.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, change your bio, but no big deal. You still have all that awesome experience.
All the
So
rest is true.
that's what we will jump in on today. So I want to know your background. Like, how did you end up focusing your life on eating disorders and eating behaviors and body image?
Yeah, I mean, I think just everything kind of brought me here. So growing up, I was a ballet dancer actually, and I studied at San Francisco Ballet. I grew up in California, and I really lived in a world of body obsession. And no one ate normally, and everyone worried about their bodies. And this was just like my foundation as a child. And so that was pretty maladaptive, and really did stick with me for a while. And then when I went off to college, I started studying psychology, and I had thought I wanted to be a teacher. But then the more I studied psychology, I was like, no, I just, all of this kind of makes sense. Like it's helping me understand so many things that I'm interested in. And so I just kind of had to go with it. I really just felt drawn there. And then I ended up going to graduate school. Like it wasn't this great plan. It was kind of like things just kept unfolding that put me on this path. And it's like I had that boyfriend in college, and if he hadn't gone off to graduate school and left the area, who knows? I might have just stayed with him. But I was like, well, I guess graduate school. Okay, like that's one option. So I ended up going to graduate school and studying developmental and health psychology. And I just, again, kept coming back to being interested in eating and body image. And I have done some health research in other areas, but I just keep coming back. It's just the one thing that I think I'm just really passionate about. I'm sure because of my own experience in part, but also because I think these issues are just so important and they're so relevant to all of us. Like we all eat, we all have these bodies, we need them to work for us. And I think we all have some feelings, or at least as adults, of just being really conflicted about some of these issues. So it's just interesting and complicated, I think.
Yeah. Oh, that's so powerful what you said at the end. And I love that it seems like this topic sort of chose you and chased you down and it all kind of worked out. But also you can totally tell you're an academic because instead of saying that the California ballet culture was like really messed up, you're like, it was so maladaptive. That was like just a very, very nice academic choice of words. So we're going to have a very serious conversation today.
I know sometimes it's hard. It's like you can take the academic out of the classroom, but I feel like I've grown in terms of being able to use everyday normal language more often. But.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to have a great conversation today. We're so honored to have you here with all this expertise, and we will definitely dial it in to the practical. So let's start with sort of a foundational question, like how is body image related to our eating behaviors?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just sort of unavoidable. So much of how we feel about our bodies has to do with what we're putting into them. And so if, we live in this culture where if you eat a kale smoothie or, have a big salad, like everyone around you kind of celebrates that. And it's not that they shouldn't, of course, because those are wonderful things. But we just learn from such an early age that what we put into our bodies matters, and it changes how we feel about ourselves then. So it's just kind of A to B to C.
Yeah, gosh, that's so interesting that you said when you eat a kale salad, everybody celebrates that, because in some ways, like, yeah, but on the flip side, we celebrate generally with sweets and desserts and junk food. So talk about a conflicting culture that
Yeah,
particularly our girls are growing up in. And
yeah,
not that this isn't a boy issue, because it certainly is, but it's magnified exponentially with our girls, which is why your book's title is The Body Image Book for Girls, very much focused on girls. So let's talk about like practical steps for parents. Like if I want to raise a child who has a healthy body image, who has a good relationship with food, can we do both at the same time, like from toddlerhood on up?
yes, absolutely. And as parents, I think we need to be really thoughtful about this because I do not think it was the way most of us were raised. So, I had a fairly unique experience growing up, but I think most adults who are raising kids right now were part of a generation where our moms were on diets and maybe even our dads were. And there was a lot of discussion about, oh, you can't eat that, or that's bad, or just I think that the culture was different. I think it has changed, but we grew up with that. And so, I can't tell you how many times my kids go to pull something from the refrigerator and I want to say like, you can't eat that, or, make this big deal about it. And I stop myself and I usually try to say nothing because I don't want to be alarmist about food. I mean, I couldn't help myself the other day because my daughter has lunch with her Zoom school. She's 13, and her Zoom school she's at now has lunch at like 10:30. And this is lunch.
So
And
hard.
she went to pull out some Ben and Jerry's and put some in a bowl. And I was like, really? Like, it's 10:30. And she was like, Mom, it's been a really long day already. And I was like,
Oh.
okay, all right, sure, and I left it at that. And I couldn't stop myself that time from being like, what is going on here? Um, but I do think that in general, if we want to raise kids who feel good about their bodies, we have to be thoughtful and we have to really try to set a good example. And that's both in terms of how we eat and in how we think about our own bodies. And so if we're constantly disparaging ourselves or calling ourselves bad because we did have ice cream, or saying, I can't believe how much weight I've gained since this quarantine, I need to go on a diet. Our kids hear that and they accept that then as being normal and sort of how they should think about themselves and food. And I think a lot of us parents and especially moms can remember experiences growing up, where your mom was like, you're wearing that, or, those pants look a little too small on you, or, something that may not have even, been meant as a criticism, but as a girl, we took that to mean like, oh my gosh, I'm fat, or she thinks I look bad, or there's something wrong with me. And so we really want to be careful that we're not modeling mistreating ourselves and also not directly being critical of our girls.
Okay. Okay. I have so many thoughts. Um, First, like you mentioned, oh, I gained weight during quarantine. I really need to go on a diet. What if that's true? Like, what if I'm a parent who really could use to lose 10 or 20 pounds and this is something I want to do? Is it just a shift in our language and how we talk about that in front of our kids? Like, how do we practically get healthier in front of our kids?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is about the language we use, right? Because all the evidence suggests that diets are not effective.
Okay.
So, I mean, I'm sort of against them in terms of, idealism, but also in terms of if you don't want to go there and be philosophical about it, if you just want to be totally practical, all the research suggests that you can go on like a low carb diet or something, or go on Weight Watchers, and in 2 years you'll gain all that weight back and probably more.
Mm.
So, what are you going to do then? If you feel like you've been in quarantine, your habits have shifted in a way you don't like, and maybe you do want to lose weight, or maybe you feel like you would feel better if you
Mhm.
lost weight. Um, then what you want to do is you want to shift your habits back. And you definitely don't want to call it a diet, because diets are sort of inherently short term and ineffective. And I know people hate it when the word lifestyle change is used, because it's sort of cliche, but really you need to think of it in terms of like your lifestyle, like something sustainable, um, and and make small changes if you want to make changes to your life, and gradual changes. Because sort of a big, like, I went from having, you know half a carton of ice cream and 2 glasses of wine every night because like I was so freaked out about what's going on in the world, to like I'm having nothing fun at night, is going to be really hard.
Mhm.
So a more gradual and sort of gentler approach tends to be much more effective. And you have to think in terms of like, well, what can I keep doing? You
For sure.
know, and some people, it's really important to them to have like some kind of sweet dessert or something. And for some people, fruit will suffice. And for other people, it won't.
Right.
And so then you have to think about like, well, how much and what? And is this something that's really going to be satisfying to me? That means I can kind of keep doing this.
Sure, sure. I mean, yeah, long-term sustainability, baby steps, definitely. I'm so all about that. So, if I'm speaking about this in front of my kids, instead of disparaging my body weight or size or how I feel, maybe like shift to the positive, like, I really wish I had more energy.
Yeah.
Or, right, like, I really wish I felt more
Yeah.
fit. I wish I could go on longer walks or runs or like whatever it is you do. I wish I wasn't falling asleep at 8 o'clock. I think I'm gonna try to eat more veggies and less sugar. What do you guys think? Does that
Yeah.
sound good? Like that kind of language as opposed to words like diet and weight loss and stuff like that. Am I on the right track?
Totally. And, some of this does depend on the age of your kids, right? If you have really little kids, I think in some ways it's better like to not tune them into some of this. Like
Hmm.
just stop buying so much ice cream. And or sometimes if I want my kids to feel like they can have those treats, but I feel like I'm eating too much ice cream. Clearly I have this on in my head right now. Um
We're
I just found
filming in, I think it's October. I'm not exactly sure what month it is, but to put it in context, we're
right.
recording in October 2020.
I know. I know. And I just found the greatest pumpkin ice cream at Trader Joe's.
No,
So
well, uh-oh.
um, because it's the pumpkin season. But so I think it's okay to just like then buy something that's a treat that your kids like, that you don't like. So then you're not tempted, and just don't make a big deal about it if they're young. And if they're older and they're going to be like, what happened, mom? You're not eating half a carton of ice cream anymore. Then, you can either be proactive and say, gosh, I was just really feeling kind of run down. And, it seemed kind of like a fun thing to do at the beginning of the pandemic. And then this has gone on for so long. I realized that in order to get through it, I really just have to take better care of myself. And
Mm,
so that wasn't really the right approach for me.
okay.
And you could even say that doesn't mean like we can never have ice cream, of course, but just, I think for me, I was overdoing it. Um, but there's a lot of nuance in that I think like a teenager would definitely get, but a 4-year-old, like I don't know if it makes a lot of sense to parse that for
Sure.
a 4-year-old. For a 4-year-old, like, then just don't buy the ice cream you do like. Buy something they like if you feel like you want to have some kind of treat available for them, or switch the whole family to fruit for dessert and just don't say anything.
Yeah,
you know,
4-year-olds are pretty adaptable, and even
Most
just to
are.
say to help their brains a little bit, you could say something like, mommy didn't feel so great after ice cream, so I'd like to see if I feel better after melon.
Yeah,
You
totally.
know, connect that eating with the way we feel. That's really important, I think,
Yeah.
for little kids.
I
Um,
think so too. And I think it's again, I don't ever want parents to feel like they're being deceptive towards their children. But I also do think that sometimes if we over explain or over focus, that can have sort of this sort of backfire effect where food is really important. And I study food like for a living. So clearly I think it's important. But is it like the most important thing? And do we want our kids to be kind of just obsessed with it? No. So, we have to kind of walk the line sometimes.
Sure thing. So, action steps to take would be to be cautious with the language you use and to be cautious how much you hyper focus. Yeah, that's definitely sort of a travesty of our parents' generation. And I think ours too. I mean, I think a lot of people still diet. This just has changed from low fat Weight Watchers to like, yeah, low carb, keto, intermittent fasting. And some of that's really healthy for adults, but definitely not for kids. I know that we were just talking about connecting the way you eat with how you feel, and you talk a lot about intuitive eating or eating intuitively. So how do we raise intuitive eaters when it comes to like how much we eat and what kind of food our kids should eat?
Yeah. I mean, a big part of this is allowing our kids to have some control even when they're little.
Okay.
And so, allowing them to make some choices, but also in terms of portion size. And so even with really little kids, it's like they very often want a snack like while you're making dinner, I learned. And as a parent, we very often then want to say like, no, because we're going to have dinner in like an hour or something. But we can sort of start to direct them towards like, well, are you bored, or like, is your stomach feeling really empty? Like turning them towards sort of their physical cues. Like, are you feeling really hungry? In which case, like, it's really not the end of the world if they have some carrots before they have dinner. Like, it doesn't really matter that much, right? Um, but sometimes we eat just because we're bored, or just because we don't have something else to do, or because something looks good. And so that's more emotional eating. That's not intuitive eating.
Mm.
And emotional eating, first of all, it doesn't often really sort of soothe the emotions we're looking to soothe. Um, I mean, it will give us something to do, but then it's not like afterwards we're like, okay, well, I'm not bored anymore. Like then you just go back to being bored.
Right.
And, for older people, if you feel kind of sad and you eat something, like it may feel good at the time, but then afterwards, a lot of times you just feel like sad and guilty. So, um, we really want to be, all of us, better intuitive eaters, where we're thinking in terms of, well, like, how would this feel right now? Am I really hungry? Like, why do I want to eat something? And how will I feel after I eat this? And not that like every eating experience has to be this barrage of questions we ask ourselves or our children, of course. But if you're sort of trying to steer a child in that direction, like, well, why aren't you eating, the vegetable? What if you did just try like a little bit of it? And that can be better than like being too forceful, because being too forceful then starts to take them away from intuitive eating.
Mhm.
And then they're thinking, well, it doesn't really matter that I'm not hungry. No one seems to care about that.
Mm. Sure. Okay. So intuitive eating would be listening to your body's cues of hunger and fullness, both when we start to eat for the right reasons, when we
Yeah.
stop eating for the right reasons, or like, and even I think for a lot of especially Americans, as we get older, we just keep eating because it feels good. So to listen to the body, right, and stop eating instead of overeating, and then think about how food makes you feel. Is that a fair definition?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, awesome. What about, do you have any tips for, because I think a lot of adults, for sure, we've broken our cues of hunger and satiety.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of kids too, especially once they get to be tweens and teens, like we literally don't know how to listen to our bodies. We don't know what they're saying. Are there any like ninja strategies to get back to that?
I mean, it's hard, especially if like your school tells you that you have lunch at 10:30 and you're like, guess what? I'm actually not hungry at 10:30.
Uh,
And so some of it is really just like, well, pay attention. And there's always in our culture sort of a push towards certain meal times. And there's
sure.
something that's practical about this. Like most moms, I hate to send my kids off to school or have them start school at home or whatever it is if they haven't eaten.
Right.
I sort of feel like that's something I want to do for my children is provide them with nourishment before they go out into the world or before they start something important. But if they're really not hungry or they're really tired, and especially as they become teenagers and their circadian rhythm is not in sync as well with the school day anymore.
Oh,
Uh,
especially teenagers, right? Because they should be shifting
right.
circadian rhythm to stay up later and sleep in longer. And they're the earliest start times in the district.
Yes. All the time it seems this way.
Oh,
And but then that's an opportunity in terms of more intuitive eating to be like, well, if you're not hungry, that's okay. I want to give you something if you're hungry, or could you take something with you? But just to sort of keep talking about this. And it's like, well, and it's hard for us as parents because also as our kids get older, they want us to do less for them, and that's
mm,
totally normal. And as I have two teenagers, sometimes I feel like you guys don't like need me at all. You don't want me to make you food. You don't want me to I embarrass you. It's so easy to start to feel like, well, what am I even doing here? On some days.
mhm.
Um, but having said that, if they want, like my son always wants second dinner at like 8 o'clock.
Right. I have a teenage boy too. Mm-hmm.
Drives me crazy. But, if he's hungry, then I'm like, okay, well, and so we try to just make like the better choice.
Okay.
Um, and sometimes that's when he will talk to me. I'll be like, okay, I'll make you a bean and burrito. And
Nice.
he'll be like, oh, that would be great if you make it. And then he'll talk to me. And so that's nice. And we're in the kitchen, just the two of us. So I really enjoy that.
Yeah.
Um,
So we talked a lot kind of about eating times, eating quantities, and you're just dipping your toe in right now to eating quality. So I
yeah.
mean, as parents, we're going to tend toward, I would like them to eat more vegetables and less sugar, perhaps. How do we talk to our kids about eating well, but yet not push so far that they're worried about food?
Yeah. I mean, I think when it comes to things like vegetables, we have to remember no kid ever liked the vegetable they were just forced to eat,
Hmm.
right? But the research does suggest that repeated exposure is really important. So we want to keep offering and we want to model these things. And sometimes it's really hard when you're the one preparing food, especially when you have little kids who tend to be pickier because you just feel like you're wasting it. But, this research literally suggests that sometimes it's like 8 to 9 times of trying something before any kind of liking starts to occur. So, like the first time, the second time, the fifth time your kid doesn't like broccoli, that's actually completely normal. And that doesn't mean that you should just give up on broccoli, right? You still put it on the table, you still eat it. You maybe try something that's, not too forceful. Like I would really like you just to try a little bite, and some households have that kind of a rule.
Hmm.
Um, and then you leave it alone. Because again, forcing can really backfire. And we just teach our kids then that like, this is like bad. Like you have to be forced to eat it. It's so bad.
Yeah, we don't
Um,
want to set up that feeling, negative feeling around food and the dinner table.
yeah, yeah,
Definitely. So obviously at Kids Cook Real Food, I'm a huge proponent of getting kids in the kitchen. Like, how do you
yeah.
think kids should interact with food apart from eating it?
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right. That's part of, what I love about what you do is that the more kids are hands-on, I think that it just really opens up this whole world so that food becomes so much more fun, right?
Mm.
And it becomes something they can gain mastery over. And I think this is especially important for little boys and teenage boys because it's I feel like girls gravitate towards doing this with their moms sometimes anyways. And sort of there's cultural messaging to girls, like all the cupcake stores and shows about making cupcakes and cakes
Mm,
and things that girls gravitate towards. But, in some ways, it's really important for our boys, especially too, to feel like they're competent and to be able to make themselves something decent, like scrambled eggs is pretty easy, or we are on this bean and cheese burrito kick, but some black beans are good for you,
yeah.
and sneak in a little bit of frozen corn, or um, so I think there's just so many benefits to having kids get involved, seeing food as fun, and just feeling competent, like they can take care of themselves. We don't want them going, off to college someday or out into the world someday and feeling like, well, I guess I'll just keep going through the drive-through because like I really don't know what else to do.
Oh, you're speaking my language. I say that all the time. Like, I can't send my kids off to college and have them land in the frozen pizza and ramen noodles aisle, or the drive-through, were even more expensive and less healthy. I know I have a 15-year-old boy, and so I got to put in a little plug. He's actually the co-author of a cookbook for kids by kids. 3 boys, 2 girls, and are the authors. And so, what an awesome example, right? That gender, cooking in the kitchen is not all about gender. It's just about feeding yourself, nourishing yourself, and being involved and really being empowered, right?
Yeah.
To be part of your own health and your own development. So anytime kids need some little inspiration to cook, get Chef Junior the cookbook. It's awesome.
Yeah, I love that. And I think too, what I like to say is food is a form of self-care, right? Like self-care is all the rage right now. And everyone thinks about self-care as being like bubble baths or face masks or something. But food is something we do multiple times a day.
Right.
It is like, I think the most quintessential essential health care, self-care that there is out there, really, right? It's like something we just do all day long to take care of ourselves, to fuel ourselves. So
Sure.
I
And
think it
sometimes
is
we think
important.
about self-care and that pampering as like, yeah, that the pampering, the treats, that's food for self-care would be that big bowl of ice cream or that huge brownie. But it's really self-care if it makes you feel
Yeah,
good, right? Like, I've got the little scratchy throat. So what did I want for lunch today? I wanted soup.
yeah,
I wanted to heat up our leftover homemade bone broth soup, and it felt so good, which is why I keep grabbing my tea and wrapping my hands around it, because it's true. Like, what we put in our bodies truly is that self-care, not only for our physical health, but I think too for our mental health and our psyche. It feels good to take care of ourselves.
it does. And also to use food as a form of showing our caring for other people.
Mm.
And, I think generation after generation, it really has been about girls and women doing that. But I think it's just such an exciting idea to have boys like your son, and hopefully mine as well, growing up where they could someday, be really competent and able to take care of a partner or a family just as well, and to be sharing those responsibilities much more than has been the tradition.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, so we just talked about food as self-care. How do you translate that into language for kids, particularly when it comes to junk food? Because I think if you said, oh, pamper yourself with food, kids would for sure be like, sweet, awesome, candy, soda, like, let's do it. So, how do you talk about food with kids when they want to eat the junk food, but yet we don't want that argument?
Yeah, it's so funny because I still remember this one time when my son was younger and he was like, "You're so lucky that you're a grown up. You can eat candy whenever you want." And I was like, "But do I?" And he's like, "No, how come you don't?" And I was like, "Because I would feel yucky. Like I like to have treats pretty often. I have a massive sweet tooth, so I cannot really hide that from anyone.
Uh-huh.
Um, I'm like, I like to eat treats, but you just feel yucky if you did all the time. And I think, with Halloween coming up, I don't know how trick-or-treating will go for people this year, but that's always sort of this moment, right? I think in families where it's like, okay, kids amass candy, they want to eat it, and then parents are sort of in this dilemma of like, well, I don't want to like be negotiating constantly, and I don't want to be like fighting with you that you can't have like this hard-earned candy you trekked around the neighborhood for. But like, we can't let them just go totally crazy either, because
Right.
everyone pays the consequence of that. The price is steep for the kid having a meltdown and then the parent, and that's not good either. So I do think even when kids are pretty young and let's say they have their Halloween candy, we can work on saying things like, I think you'll feel best if you just have one or two pieces right now. Why don't you see how you feel after that? Or let's take a little break after that.
Mm-hmm.
And I say one or two pieces because we're talking about pretty small pieces usually with
Sure.
Halloween. I don't mean like, big king size servings or anything. But making kids feel like they have some control and some autonomy, and that you're not just like always telling them what to do, can be really important. And so you definitely don't want to be fighting about food. It just can
Mhm.
create really unhealthy dynamics within your family and make everyone miserable. And sometimes I think that means that we have to lose some of the battles to win the war.
Mm.
So at the dinner table, if they're like, I will not try broccoli one more time, at some point, then maybe say like, okay, but we're going to keep eating it because we really like it. And it doesn't mean they don't come around eventually,
Mhm.
so, and it doesn't mean that we should deprive ourselves of those good things. Um,
Sure thing, sure thing. And you talked about modeling, you talked about repeated exposure, and these are just those messages that over and over we parents need to hear, because it has to, it bolsters our courage and our
yes,
stamina to stick with the long game as
that's right.
parenting at
The
this
long
age
game.
can become. Yes.
Yes.
So, Charlotte, I love to leave parents with really a message of hope. So, if you could encourage parents in one way, one little nugget that you really want us all to remember walking away from this interview, what do you want us to hold on to in our brains?
I interviewed a ton of tween and teen and young adult girls and women when I was working on this book. And some of the interviews were a little bit discouraging because it's always hard to hear young people feel bad about themselves,
Yeah.
but most of them were really inspiring. I feel like this next generation of kids is so amazing. And
Mhm.
I had so much fun working on this book. And I'm currently working on a companion book for boys.
Oh, cool.
I think that, this generation of kids is just, I feel like so much more thoughtful, so much smarter than I was as a kid.
Oh,
And I just love talking with them and getting inside their brains and realizing that, we have an impact on them. So, when we are thoughtful ourselves and a little bit careful in how we broach some of this, it has an impact and we can make a difference with our own kids. And I think really together we can raise a generation of kids who can view food in a healthy way and can have a really healthy relationship with food and their bodies. So all of this work is not for nothing. Like
mm.
these young people I've talked with inspire me. They're great.
Well, what a lovely, unexpected message of hope. Literally, that there is so much hope. It's already there, it's already
It's
in the young
there.
generation. Parents are
Yeah,
already doing a great job, right? We've leveled up from the previous
we have, I
generation.
think.
Good job, parents.
Yes, no, we have. And I used to, have these interviews or focus groups, or I did all these things and I would just be like all night afterwards texting or emailing, these different parents who had sent their kids to me and be like, your kid is amazing. Like this was
Aw.
so great. And I think too, sometimes when you're the parent, we don't always get to see that side
Mm.
of our own kid. I mean, we of course see amazing parts of our own children and we adore them. But sometimes, I think our kids are even better maybe on their best behavior and
Right.
around other people. And
For
so,
sure.
it's important to realize that um, that there's just a lot of good out there in this next generation of kids. I'm really hopeful.
Well, that is wonderful to hear. Thank you so much, Dr. Charlotte Markey, author of The Body Image Book for Girls. You can find more about that at thebodyimagebookforgirls.com, and it's on Amazon. So I've learned a lot from you today, and it's always good, even if we've heard some of these tips before, it's so good for us busy, busy parents to like click our brains into gear and go, oh yeah, that one. Oh yeah, that's important. So again, thank you for reminding us to use positive language about food, to give our kids some control, some choices, and to really help them see their bodies as an asset, and not something to fear and not something to have to always be a project, right?
Right.
It's just part of us that's going to help us do well and thrive in life. So
That's right.
thank you again so very much. Audience, I'm Katie Kimball for the Healthy Parenting Connector from Kids Cook Real Food. We're all in this together, parents. We're all doing our best to raise a healthy generation. And according to Dr. Charlotte Markey, it's working. It's working. It's awesome. So I will see you again next week with another expert helping us raise a healthy generation.